Good morning, everybody. It's Peter here from AJS, and it's my delight to take you into a jeweller's workshop somewhere around Australia. And this week we're going to sunny Adelaide and the even sunnier Catherine Grocott. Welcome, Catherine.
Good morning, everybody. How is everybody?
I'm sure they're all great. I'll speak on their behalf.
Excellent.
And now, Catherine, would you just like to introduce what we're going to get up to today? I believe it's to do with tab settings.
That's correct. So what we're doing today is called external tab setting. So if I put this under the camera here, you should be able to see a little tab set pendant that I've made. So tab setting is a way of being able to set mostly flat stones or flat bottom features or elements. So in this particular pendant, there's actually like a little seashell, off I think it's a sea snail, that's been featured there. But because it doesn't require any soldering or any really difficult or technical skills, it can be a great way to start your stone setting journey. So it's quite a nice, simple technique. One of the things you do have to consider is the type of feature that you're going to use. So something like,
Catherine, it's just a little out of focus there. I just wondering if you could move it so we can try and get it. Maybe.
Yeah, if I go, is that better on my hand?
Not quite. Yeah.
If I go down a bit lower, will that? Oh, don't you love technology? I love that. Oh, maybe if I bring it over here.
Anyway, I think we've got the general idea. It's beautiful.
So yes, so basically what tab setting is you can see these little tabs that fold up over the piece and secure the element in place. So that's what we're going to be exploring today, is how to do tab setting.
So I assume, Catherine, there's the compromise between getting the job done securely and then have it look visually appealing so that it doesn't impact negatively on your piece.
Very much so, yes. Kind of thinking through what it's going to look like and what you might design around the piece as well. So certainly thinking through some of those design elements before you start is really important. So yes, before I start telling you all the things that you're going to need, I might acknowledge that I am living, working and creating on the land of the Kaurna people, and acknowledge that their spiritual connection is still strong and alive today to the land, and acknowledge my appreciation for elders past, present and emerging. So should we have a look at the equipment you need?
Let's do that, shall we?
All right. So first of all, you need the element that you're going to set. So things like, we're going to be setting this little one today, a little adventurine. But as you can see, it's a cabochon. It's a cabochon stone. So it's got a nice flat bottom on the base, and it's got that kind of rounded top. But you might be able to tell that this is not like perfectly oval. It's got a little bit of kink to it. So it's not a perfectly shaped stone, which again makes this a tab setting wonderful for setting odd shapes, because you can take that into consideration and it's not as difficult to set as, say, like a bezel setting, where you've got to get the shape around the stone absolutely perfect. So something like, got some hematite and some opal, some charoite, all suitable kind of stones. But you might also think about other things like seashells, or even sea glass might be perfect for this, because quite often it has a flat top and a flat bottom. Or one of the other things I see quite a bit of that's tab set is enamelled structures. So if you're an enameller, but you want to feature those things in jewellery, enamel pieces in tab settings work quite well. So the biggest thing is about having that flat base. If it does not have a flat base, so something like a tumbled stone, then you would have to actually kind of, cut out the base so that the kind of bulging element would fit through the bottom. So we've got our stone, we've got our metal. Now, one of the other things about tab setting is because it is considered a cold connection, just about any metal is suitable for this. So I'm going to be using copper today, and you might be able to tell I can texture it a bit if I want to use that as an element, or I can use just flat parts. You can use aluminium. So aluminium is not very easily soldered at all, especially not in a jewellery setting. So aluminium can work quite well, but also your precious materials as well. So silver, gold, all kinds of metals can be used for this, but you do have to think about the thickness. So depending on the type of material and depending on where it's going to be worn on the body and how kind of robust it needs to be, will determine your thickness. So for the copper that I'm using today, I'm just going to do like a little pendant. I've got, this is 0.55 mil thick. It's about, 0.5, 0.6 for a pendant, a little bit thicker for a ring, maybe 0.8. But if you were doing something like titanium, you could probably go even thinner because it's such a harder metal. But something like aluminium, which is so soft, you could go a little bit thicker. So again, think through the type of metal that you're using. You do want your metal annealed. So because of time today and the space that we're in, I've already got that annealed. So anneal your metal. You also need, when you're doing your designing, just some paper and pencils, textures, whatever you want to design with. You need some scissors so that you can cut some designs out to do some testing. You need something that you can test your piece out on. So you can use something like, some cardstock or shim or foil. So both have pros and cons. The cardstock, that is much easier to cut out and play with and far more accurate. Whereas aluminium foil or copper shim, something like that, it holds its shape better. So it is easier to be able to tell that it's going to hold and how long the tab should be and things like that. So kind of choose your poison as to how you want to assess it and test it. You need some a saw frame, saw blades. I've got your sawing, some nylon jaw pliers. This helps to prevent any marring on the metal. Files and sandpaper. So I'm just going to use my little needle nose files for this. Needle files and just some sandpaper around a block. And also a bezel pusher. Now, one of the things with a bezel pusher, this one I have made, a friend of mine made for me. And if I hold it up under this one, you might be able to tell that it's actually the beginning of an old file that's been cut into shape, and it's got this kind of nice thick but slightly curved end, that has been, well polished. If you get a pretty kind of normal bezel pusher from many jewelry stores, check that face before you start and see whether it has been die cut. If it's been die cut, it will usually have half of it will be kind of very sharp, and then the other part will actually look like it's got little, almost like saw marks on it. That's usually the evidence of some kind of guillotine or die cut construction. If you see that, you need to get rid of it, because every single one of those marks is going to echo onto your piece. So yeah, sand that away and then give it a really, really good polish so there's not a skerrick of a mark on it, so it doesn't mar your work. So just a heads up tip, look after your tools, make sure they're beautiful. All right, now, shall we get started?
I think we shall.
All right.
So what are we going to do first then, Catherine?
We are going to actually design the piece. So one of the first things you need to do is actually figure out the shape of your stone. So one of the best ways to do that is to place your stone on a piece of paper and draw around it so that you can see what shape you're working with. And you need to try and be quite accurate when you're drawing around it so that you can see whether there's any kinks, dips, anything like that. So if you have a look here, oh, now can you guys see that? Is that okay?
You can see an oval, yeah.
Yep, great. So if you, we might do this in text so it's a bit more obvious. You can see that this has a dip right there. So just an ever so slight indentation. That is a perfect placement for a tab. So when you're thinking about tab setting, you want to put your tabs in locations that are going to really nicely secure your stone. So look for tabs. If there's one here, probably putting one on the opposite side is a good plan. Now, the rule of thumb is normally that you have a minimum of 3 tabs to hold something securely enough. But for most things, I would go more. So for this piece, I would normally go at least 4 tabs. So because of the fairly even nature of this, the tab there, a tab there, and a tab there will work quite nicely. So once you've got the shape of your stone and you've identified where you want your tabs, you can then start doing your designing. So if I do my little stone again, I might like to design something that has a tab here, then a tab over here, a tab here, and a tab over here. But then what do I do in between? So my spaces could be all, what happens around it could be anything I want. So I could design something nice and simple that's just going to echo the shape of the stone. And so it's basically going to get hidden behind. Now, when you look at this kind of shape, this is where people will sometimes start thinking or calling it like turtle setting, because it does look a little bit like a turtle, especially if you then want to add a bail. So you've got to think about, again, your design process. how are you going to hang it? How is it going to attach? So a bail might be the nice, simple, easy thing. And there's your turtle, a long neck turtle.
It is indeed.
Yeah. So just adding another piece of, another tab, as it were, and using that to be your bail might work. Or you might do something else. You might do, I've got my little stone, and I might use something like a little template. And I use the template design, the outer shape. So I've got I know my little tabs. We're going to go here. But I want to create, a nice kind of, a bigger piece that's going to have a background to it. So I might have something like this. So something like that might be more effective. But then I've got to think through, well, how am I going to hang it? If it's a pendant, I might just do something simple like a drill hole and put a jump ring through it. I could end up doing something that's a bit more free form. Oh, so that piece there, that could end up looking something like this with my stone in the middle, like that. Or I could do something a bit more free form. So I've got my stone. And I might decide that I want to do, something a bit more, kind of interesting.
Fried eggish.
That's right. Yeah, kind of crazy in outline. But I've still got to figure out those tabs. Those tabs still need to come back into right against that stone when I'm designing it. If they're out here, of course, they're not going to, if I kind of start way out here, the tab is going to be too far away from the stone. It's got to be right up against that base. So I've got to bring them, I've got to bring those in. So somehow I have to connect back to here. So I might, bring that in and bring it back out again. And bring that out to there and shape it around. So then you've just got to think about how you're going to make this design work. So I'd be cutting out that bit, cutting out that bit, cutting out that bit, cutting out that bit. All right. So once I've decided on kind of which shape I like the best, I'm then going to transfer that onto something that I can test against my stone. So for the ease of today, I'm going to use cardstock simply because it's easier to cut out. But if you want that more accurate and able to hold it in, then use your aluminium foil or your copper shim. So for this, I will draw up my stone. I've decided that I want my tabs. And I'm going to do a bail like that. And so then I can just cut it out.
So, Catherine, how important is uniformity in the tab process?
Exactly. That is completely up to you. I mean, you could actually have tabs. So here's your stone. You could have tabs that, actually I might draw that a bit bigger so you can see. Let's get a look at this. So if you've got a nice stone, you could actually have tabs that go like that and make it a design feature. If you want something, kind of nice and exact and precise, then absolutely, you get your ruler out and you measure them and you make sure that they're, 2 mil thick or whatever. So yes, do think through what your final design is, what you want it to look like. For the purpose of today, I'm drawing it up freehand for the demonstration, but the piece that I am going to glue onto my metal to saw around, I measured that yesterday so that, you guys didn't have to see me and hang around cutting, measuring it exactly, etc. So absolutely, if you need or want something to be precise, measure it. If you want something free form that's going to suit your stone or your sea glass, it can be free form. So that kind of piece would end up looking more like this. Yeah. So yeah, the kind of the world is your oyster with tab settings. It really can be, you really can do an incredible amount of creativity with tabs. And you can choose the number and the size depending on what you're setting. So yes, be creative. For the purpose of the demo, we're just going to do something kind of quick and easy so that you guys can see the process, that you guys can go away and do as much creating as you like. Okay, so I'm just cutting this out with scissors. If you use aluminium foil or shim, sometimes a pair of scissors will get through it. If you've got some that's a little bit thicker than a pair of like decent shears, might be what you need to cut through that. Now I find that cardstock gives me a little bit more, because it's just that little bit thicker, it does give a little bit more of an accurate kind of feel for where it's going to land, whereas paper, because of its thinness, it's not quite, you've got to take into consideration the thickness of the metal, and cardstock is just that little bit closer. And the cardstock also means that once you do this, you can determine how long you want your tabs to be. The tabs, you want them the length where it is just going to fit over the sides of the stone or the element.
So cut your tabs longer rather than shorter at this stage.
Exactly. So if I push the tabs up, I can then put my stone in place. And I can determine, pushing them over, yeah, those are a pretty good length. They're going to hold the stone in nicely, and they're not too kind of distracting. This one isn't a very big stone, so if I went huge, big tabs, I'd kind of hide too much of the stone. But I think those look pretty good. And with my bail, yeah, I should have enough to be able to do a nice little bend over and get that, big enough for something at the back. So once I've determined that, and I'm happy with the length of everything, you might see on this little one here. Oops, come back. If I lay that out flat, you can probably see there that the tabs, if I made them the same length as the outside setting, they'd be too long. But if I cut those tabs down a little bit, then you can have that kind of nice feature around the outside, and the tabs don't unnecessarily distract or hide the stone. All right. Alrighty, so once I'm pleased with that, I've got that determined, then I have to transfer that shape onto my metal. And there's a few ways you can do this. You can, once you've got this determined, you can redraw this onto a piece of paper and glue it on, cut it out. You might decide to colour it with texture and then put a score line through. So that's another way you could do it. But because I've cut that one out already so that it's nice and accurate, I'm going to glue that down with some glue and then cut around it.
Just while you're doing that, Catherine, just a shout out to Trevor from the Macleay and Gem and Mineral Club. So welcome on board, Trevor.
Hello, Trevor.
If anyone else would like to give us a shout out as well, that'd be great. Let us know where you're from. And
certainly for those of you who are into lapidary, and from what I understand, cabochons are quite often where people start their gem cutting experience. Mm-hmm. This is a great way to be able to set your stones. You're practicing making and cutting stones. Well, this is a lovely, easy way to set those cabochon stones that you're making. Okay, so I've glued that down. You can see my long neck turtle there.
Beautiful.
And we'll saw this out. Now, hopefully this won't take me too long, guys, and you're not sitting here watching me saw for ages. Okay, so I've got my saw frame. Now, what I do want to do is put a new blade in. So for those of you who haven't used a saw frame before, this is the saw frame here, handle at the bottom, usually a couple of knobs, one at the top and one at the bottom. So I'm going to take out my old blade that has been well and truly used, and I'm going to put in a new one. So when you feel a saw blade, the teeth run in one direction and you can kind of slide your hand down it and it won't hurt. But if you try to push it up, the blades will actually the teeth will catch on your finger. So when you're setting a blade into your frame, you want it to go so that the teeth are facing down the frame and out towards you. Of course, it's not going to do any good if they're in backwards. You can't cut. So what I do the top one up first and get it right up against the block here. And then to set it, you have to have it tight. So you might be able to see, I've got it here against my chest. I lean into it and that creates the tension. And then where it sits here, I then tighten that up. Nice and firm. When I release, the stall frame will kind of stretch back out again, and you should be able to hear, don't know if you can hear, but a high-pitched sound when you flick it.
You could perform a concert with that.
Exactly. Somebody once said to me that, you know, it should be like high C, and I'm like, I don't have perfect pitch. I wouldn't know if it was high C. Anyway.
Yeah, Catherine Dawn has just commented that she's from the Northern Beaches in Sydney, and she's got a stone just waiting for this tutorial. So,
marvelous, Dawn, fantastic. Hopefully, this will be helpful for you then. So, got your saw blade, some kind of lubricant. I tend to put mine just on the back so it doesn't clog the teeth. But this is Peppy Lube, but yeah, any kind of lubricant. Some people just use beeswax. But yeah, something that will help the blade run smoothly through the metal. All right. Now, when you're starting off sawing, what I tend to do, I've just got to get my, get that out of the road. I tend to start with my thumbnail where I want my first cut to be. And I just give a couple of strokes upwards that just create a little dent. And then it's got something to catch into that I can then saw. Now, if you have a look at my bench peg here, I've got like a wide gap down here, skinny gap up the top. Up here is where you actually want to saw, because that will give the least amount of movement of your piece. It won't, make sure your fingers are out of the way and you're using an up and down motion. Pretty much, you don't actually move the blade around. The blade is only going up and down, but it's up and down in the one spot, a bit like a sewing machine, but you move the metal. When you're doing curves or corners, you want that blade to be straight up and down. So I've reached the corner here. Oh, can you see? Yep, I've reached the corner there. So I keep the blade going up and down just in the one spot, and I'm turning the metal so that I can then continue around the next piece. So the saw frame, straight up and down. Yes, you are sawing, you're not cutting bread. So it's up and down, not sideways. One of the things you notice with a nice fresh blade, it cuts like butter. It's lovely. The other thing with a saw frame is that you don't have to force it. You actually want the blade to be doing the work, not your pressure. So yeah, you don't have to really press hard at all. Yeah, the teeth will do the work for you. Now, again, you can choose how you want the ends of your tabs to look. So I'm going to try and give like just a gentle little curve to them. But, you know, if they're not exact or your sawing skills aren't, great yet, then you can clean those up once you start filing. And we're going down the other side. into that corner, blade up and down in the same spot, move the metal and around this curve. Yes, hope you can see clearly that it's, the blade just goes up and down. Move the metal as it curves around the shape of the stone. Into that corner, straight up and down, move the metal in the one spot. And add along this tab here. I'd so love to see what, was it Dawn and Trevor?
Yes, and he's been joined by Wayne from New Zealand. So
oh, hello, Wayne.
Thanks for joining us from New Zealand, Wayne.
Yes.
Amongst others as well.
It would be certainly great to, I'd love to see what you guys end up making out of what you learned today. Being able to see some of your own creations, that would be amazing. So back into that corner, straight up and down, turn the metal. Now I'm about to come up to that bail length. So this is the one space where you can slightly angle your blade. So normally, if you've got curves or anything like that, you really do want to keep the blade vertical, straight up and down. The only exception to that is when you've got a really long straight section. That's where you can ever so slightly lower the top of your blade so that it's at a slight angle. And what that does is it helps to keep your cut straight. The reason for this is that there's more of the blade kind of touching on the inside thickness of the metal. So yeah, you can get a much straighter cut with it, yes, ever so slightly bent. And hopefully you can see that's a pretty good straight line. But as I come to curve around the end, I bring my blade back up to vertical and start moving the metal to spin around. One of the biggest reasons why a blade will break when you're sawing is because you've moved the metal too quickly. And it's caught, and then you're kind of forcing the blade, and then you just end up snapping it. Sometimes if you've got tight areas, it can be easier just to cut a little bit further past and then bring your blade back to be able to do a tight section. But that only works if you've got the spare kind of material to be able to cut into. So turn my blade ever so slightly forward so that it's nice and it's going to help me get a straight cut. Almost at the corner. Blade goes back to being vertical now. Round and round in the one spot, turn the metal. It's almost like you want to kind of almost saw backwards when you're turning a tight corner like that. Into another corner. Yeah, you just backwards, turn the middle. Now, at this point, because there's so much metal over here, I'm actually going to cut off the end just to get rid of this amount, because this is so thin, it has the potential to start like vibrating once I get closer to the end. So I've cut off that little bit, and now I'll come back in and do that last little section. Sometimes with very thin metal, you might want to get right up against the very, very edge. The other thing you can do also is, like I annealed this yesterday so that it was ready for class, and then not having to demonstrate that on screen. But of course, as soon as your metal is annealed, it's softer. So it's going to be that little bit, kind of trickier to saw. But you then have to anneal it before you tab set it. Otherwise, your tabs won't bend and be nice and close to the stone. So we're in that corner. Up and down, and we're up to the home stretch. Hope that hasn't been too boring, guys.
That was a tremendous demonstration. Yeah, and I dare say, I mean, you don't want to fatigue at the end and undo all your good work by making a mistake right at the last.
That's right, exactly.
So Penny from Geraldton has joined us. Hi, Penny. And
hello, Penny.
She says that she really enjoys soaring. She says it's so therapeutic.
Oh, absolutely. You can. This is like, it can become meditative. If anybody wants some inspiration for hand soaring, have a look at Melissa Cameron's early work using recycled tin cans, but kind of fancy tins, like quite often she would use like biscuit tins or sometimes powder compacts. And she does the most amazing hand soaring in these intricate shapes, and then like layers them all. Oh, they're amazing, absolutely amazing. So yes, if you want some inspiration, Melissa Cameron. Okay, now that last little bit, I'm just gonna, there we go. Alrighty, so we have our little turtle, but of course we don't really want all that paper on there. So, what I normally do is, of course, go over to the sink and wash it off with some soap or water. But for here, I've just got a little bowl, little bowl of water to just soak that paper off. Because I've only used a glue stick, it shouldn't take too much to remove it. You can also use super glue or something like that, but then really you've got to torch fire that off to remove it. There we go, so that's all off. And just a little bit of paper towel to dry that before we start to clean up the edges. Now, with this being thin, we'll have to be very careful with the filing that we're not bending the tabs too much. Alrighty, we want, here's my half. I'm a bit of a creature of habit. I like my little half file, half round file. So it's got flat base on one side, rounded face on the other. And that is just, it's a lot easier to be able to file in both directions with different types of curves. But yeah, files, as many of you would know, only work in one direction, or they work the most effectively in the one direction. So pushing away from you to clean up those edges and get rid of any saw marks. And then curving, following the shape of the curve as you go around to get those ends nice and round. So it's always better to file against something. Getting into there. Rather than filing in the air. You haven't got any kind of resistance. But something that is this thin and this soft, you may have to kind of just hold it, but then have your hand wedged against something. So there's always something kind of holding it in place. So filing against a piece. If you hear kind of horrible, high-pitched squealing sounds when you're filing, that's usually an indication that you've either
cut your finger off.
Yeah, hopefully not that high-pitched. Yeah, it's usually an indication that there's too much vibration happening and you need to kind of wedge it down. So yeah, sometimes, depending on what you're filing, you might have like a little notch in your peg and you can wedge it into there. Yeah, quite often jewelers will actually like cut their pegs to suit the piece that they're making. You know, this is sacrificial. You do what you need to do to it to make it, yeah, to make it work for you. So, yes, once again, this might be a little bit tedious for you guys watching this, but yes, get rid of all those saw marks that are going to be kind of a bit ugly to see. You want a nice finish. And once you finish all your filing and sanding, this is when you want to finish off your piece in terms of its like texture. So if you had like some kind of texture like this, you would want to do that beforehand, because as soon as you start to hammer or anything this, you will distort your shape. But if you want to do things like, you know, kind of highly polish it, or maybe satin finish it, you could do that after you do your filing. This little one needs a bit of a curve. That was the last one we cut. And so, yeah, trying to get that curve on the very last of the annealed 0.5 metal, a little bit tricky. So we'll use the file to get that shape a little bit better. Gosh, it's lovely having people from New Zealand joining us. That's
I know, we're international.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, which piece have I done and which piece haven't I done? I'll take this bit. So yeah, certainly the more accurate you are with your sawing, the less finish you have to do with your filing and sanding. So certainly as you get better and better at your sawing, the less kind of fixing up you have to do. All right, we are just about done.
So Gail's just made a comment, and she says, as a novice to this, I'm learning so much with every step. So she's really appreciating your attention to detail here.
Great. So yes, I apologise to those who know this back to front, but for those people who are brand new to this, learning all those little hints and tricks that the experienced jewelers know so well, it's always helpful to know. All right, we have got a little turtle.
Hey.
So now our job is to just check quickly that we have got, there's my little dint, there's my little dint. Make sure I get that stone correctly oriented and just pop it down to see whether there's too much like metal sticking out the back, whether I have to file anything up, or just make sure that I've got it in the right kind of place. And that's looking pretty good. There's a kind of even amount around the outside. If I did need to fix it, this would be the time to fix it. Now, I'm not going to sit here polishing or anything like that, but I will give it a little quick satin wheel. I'm not a fan of high polish, like that's not my look. I like more matte finishes. So the satin wheel for me is, I love them. So yeah, into your micromotor, and it does give this just nice, helps if you turn it on. It does give this nice kind of brushed effect, and quite quickly. Try to go in one direction with the satin wheel if this is what you're going to use. But if you are going to polish, of course, go through all your, your grades of sandpaper. And then your rouge and your Tripoli, Tripoli then rouge, to get that really nice polished finish. It's a lot more difficult to polish after, especially depending on your stone. If you had something like a diamond, you can put a file across a diamond and you're not going to affect it, but your sandpaper will. But for other stones, anything that you touch it with is going to affect it. So yeah, be aware of kind of what stone you're going to use, how you want to finish it, and get your finishing as good as you can possibly get it now, so that you don't have to do as much later. And then you can then kind of protect it by using your nylon pliers. So this is where we come to the first step of the setting process. So you want to use, like, these nylon jaw pliers really are great. And these pliers are parallel pliers. So as you can see, when they open and shut, the whole of the blade, like the whole of the jaws, kind of touch each other. Whereas if you're using kind of V pliers, they start touching from the bottom and then touch at the top. So yeah, if you're kind of holding something, I don't know if you can see, there's always like a little gap at the very, very end. Whereas with parallel pliers, they grip the whole length. So investing in parallel pliers for the jobs that need them, they really are beneficial. They will usually cost a little bit more than other pliers, but your problem is that they don't come in as many profiles. Yeah. Okay, so we're now going to move these jaws 90 degrees so that they sit up a little bit.
So just before you do, are you able to just give us a look at the texture of the
oh, yes. There? Yeah, now can you, if I put it against something else, does that show up a bit better? So it's just got, it's as if, you know, when you kind of sand something with steel wool, it's got that kind of finish to it. But yeah, these kind of satin wheels for your micromotor, oh, they're just so quick and lovely. And you can get them in different kind of grits as well. So yeah, from very, very fine, so it's very subtle, through to much more scratchy and kind of, it gives almost textury. So this one's kind of in the middle. Yeah, a mid one.
No problem. Thank you.
Grade. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take our pliers, and we want to bend them as close as possible to that. If I bring up my drawing. We do want the fold line to be right here on that fold. So definitely having really good accurate cutting at that point and this point is very important. So it, yeah, kind of taking the time to ensure that those are correct. Yeah, it's worth putting the effort into getting that accurate. So you take your pliers and you hold them so that they're just ever so slightly back in from there to allow for the bend of the material and the thickness of the metal. So I'm going to bring them up to 90 degrees. Can people see that? That's Yep, got it. So I go around, and it can be beneficial to kind of, in your brain, always doing the opposite, so that when you're setting it, you do the same thing. Up 90 degrees. Up 90 degrees. Up 90 degrees. And so you might have seen, I'm using, rather than moving the tab, I'm using my fingers to press the whole of the back of the piece up, because there's more area there to work with. Now, this will be the test. Was my sawing accurate? I can then put my stone in and see. All right. So each one of my tabs needs to come in a little bit more, and this is where your bezel pusher comes in. So now we've got our stone in place, but we want the base of the tabs to be pushed in as close as possible to the base of the stone. So I'm going to hold my stone in place, use my, and kind of clamp on quite firmly, and I'm going to use the bezel pusher to push from the base and get them as close to that stone as possible. I'm then going to go to the opposite side and do the same thing. Then going to the third one. So you like going 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So that's how you want those to, to move.
And Catherine, we've just had a comment from Carol. Welcome, Carol.
Hello, Carol.
She says that she's loving these tutorials. They're great for beginners, she says.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you, Carol.
That is great to hear. Okay, so now that I've got those kind of pushed a little bit closer from that base, I just want to get those.
So how awkward is that there, Catherine? Because you don't have a lot of leverage because you're in mid-air, as you mentioned.
That's
before.
right. Yeah, this is where strong jeweler fingers can help. You can also, you can kind of wedge your hand into your bench peg, or have the stone and your piece wedged up against something. So yeah, absolutely. If you don't have the kind of finger strength to hold this in place, but even here, I'm still wedging my hands against against the bench. So having it always wedged in is definitely helpful. Just floating up here in midair, then you've got nothing to kind of hold it against. So you're either wedging your hands against and holding in place, or holding your piece against something to wedge it. Okay. So once you wedge those bases in, your stone shouldn't move much at all. Like at the moment, it's just got only a tiny amount of wiggling. You really want it so that it doesn't move at all once you get those bases in. Okay, so now you can probably see that the tabs they're floating kind of in midair. You want them wrapped around that stone to hold it in place. So now we come to the time where we kind of lay it down, and we're going to be pushing over the top. So we're kind of using rocking motions with our bezel pusher. I might just move some things out so I'm actually going to put my elbow against my bench, whole hand against, and now we're going to rock over, kind of backwards and forwards motions to get those stones down, to get the tabs down, sorry. So we're starting from the base and we're rolling up and over. Okay, so that's got good connection. We go over to the opposite one. So we've done, 12 as it were. We're now going to do 3. Start with the bezel pusher at the base, rock it over the top. Yeah. So this one first.
Gee, the mice are bad there, Catherine.
Oh, yes. We are having some installations and extraction put in here at Jam Factory at the moment. All right, now we've got our stone in place. And yeah, you...
Just a bit lower, Catherine.
Yep, sorry guys. I'm trying to look at it closely.
Oh, you were trying to look at it.
I'm as blind as a bat. So, everything has to be this far from my face. But yeah, the tabs now are sitting, nice and close on the top. But even for me, I would even, if I was doing this for myself, to sell or anything like that, I would want those tabs to be just a fraction of a mil closer into that stone. I don't know if you can see, there's just this tiny little pocket of air that I can see through the stone. And I don't want that. So there's like 2 that are just got that little bit too much air. I don't like that. You want it nice and close and snug. But the tops are holding on nice and firmly. So the whole of the tab is sitting right against the stone. Now, of course, we've got this long, kind of my turtleneck. Well, I want to do something with that. And we're going to make a little bail. Now, I don't know if, hopefully AJS sell these, but these are bail pliers. You can get them in different sizes. I got these years and years ago. But yeah, all sorts of different sizes here. Oh, let me get the last one off. But as you can see, the whole of the nose is parallel, like it doesn't shrink down like normal round nose pliers. So a normal round nose, it tapers down to a point, whereas bail pliers, they have, kind of different diameters. And what that means is that they will bend a bail perfectly roundly, but of course, if you've got the tapered ones, they'll have a slight kink in them. The problem with these, of course, is that they come in set diameters, whereas you can make whatever diameter you want with the tapered ones. So, it's definitely, you've got to choose how you want to do this. But for this purpose, I'm going to use these. At the very, very end, I'm going to use the very smallest one, and I'm going to kick out the very end point to make what they call a shepherd's hook bail. So I'm going to hold the pliers, I'm right-handed, so I hold the pliers in my right hand, and I use my finger to push the whole of the other of the piece out. So I do a little kick, about 90 degrees, almost 90 degrees, and I get that little kink. I'm then going to use larger size. I'm not sure that size. And we're going to roll the bail around so that it goes behind the piece. So again, I'm going to hold in right hand, and this time I'm going to push away. I'm going to roll all the way around. And there I've got a nice little shepherd's hook bail.
It's a piece of art.
Oh, I wish we are definitely struggling with getting this to stay in focus, aren't we? Like my bench seems to be at focus, but the piece just.
Yeah.
I hope you guys.
We got the idea. Yeah.
So yes, I've now got a finished little simple tab set pendant. And this kind of design, it's very much focused on the stone. The stone is the main feature. The tabs just are keeping it in place. It's almost got that kind of, it's like the easier version of a claw setting. But yeah, a great way to set cabochon stones, enamel, sea glass, seashells, kind of anything. But it certainly suits things with that flat bottom. The flat base to it is definitely the easiest to set.
And the copper and the green go well together too, don't they?
Well, yes, I very deliberately chose the copper for this particular stone so that hopefully it would show up on camera a little bit better, a bit more obvious. So I hope that worked.
So if there are any questions or comments from our viewers, please send them forward just before we wrap up. That would be great.
That would be fantastic.
Or please feel to reach out to Catherine either through this post in Facebook, or her social details are in the post as well if you want to contact her for further advice. I
think one of the other just little hints, is when you are thinking about those tab placements, it's actually not the best place to put them on the fattest part of the stones, because they can actually move out. You want to kind of have the fat parts free, and then they're captured by the tabs. They can't move anywhere. So yeah, keep thinking about, you know, how your design's going to work. So definitely paper is cheap. Use paper and cardboard to practice some designs and see how it's going to work. Yeah, rather than cutting out your silver and then discovering that, oh, the stone won't stay in place. It's going to twist out of place, or yeah. Okay. Any
so, Catherine,
questions?
I might get you to take a photo later, and we'll put it in the post of that finished object, just so people can.
Oh yes. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. We can do that. Yeah, that sounds good.
So now, Dawn has said, would the technique change if the bottom of the stone was not flat near the edges?
Yes. Yep. Let me draw that for you so you can see. So effectively, if you like, when I've done this before using non-flat bottomed stuff, it's been 3 lots of tumbled stones. So let's see if we can, let's do another piece of paper. Okay, so if you've got, so imagine this is your piece of metal from the side view. And you've got a stone, there's another colour. You've got a stone that has this kind of point at the bottom. Effectively, you can't put that point there. It just won't stay in place. It's going to rock and twist. So you have to seat it into your bottom place, into that bottom plate. So you want that kind of top edge, I can echo that stone, to kind of look like that. But it means you're going to have a little bit sticking out the bottom, like this. So what do? You have to cut something out. So that stone would then have to have a cutout of some kind that echoed the shape of the stone, so that when you seat the stone into it, you know, if it was this kind of shape on top, it fits down and sinks into it. You may not have to, you may not have to cut it all the way through. It might be that you just have to shape some kind of depression. So yeah, again, if you had one that was slightly shallower from the side view, let's do it down here. You may just have to kind of hollow out a little bit. And then your stone kind of can sink into it. And then you cut your tabs from the metal that's around. That one can come up there. Like that. And then you'd have one from over here, from the facing bit that would come up. Like that. Does that make sense? Was that Dawn?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So how do you go about getting that impression or that cut to match the stone?
That's actually the tricky part. Again, I would do some cardboard cutouts to start with. So if it's a cut, then yeah, basically you have to saw that out. And that can be tricky because, yeah, It is so much easier to cut a piece of metal with your blade going straight up and down. But for something like this, you may actually want the blade on an angle. So it would actually be going this way for this side, this way for this side. So yeah, you're kind of cutting in at this angle, depending on the shape of the stone. So that takes a lot more energy and effort, because normally when you cut, your sides are vertical. But for a stone, it's unlikely that it's going to have this nice little straight edges that can pop into a depression. If it's just a hollow, like this one, you'd have to burr that out. So using, realistically, probably just round burrs. Yeah, let me see. So these are ball burrs or round burrs. So they can go on your micromotor and they can just burr out small areas. But again, you'd want to kind of figure out the shape of what that depression is going to look like. Yeah, relatively accurately, so it can just sit quite snugly.
So, Catherine, Dawn has just commented that the stone is smooth, but it's just not level.
Okay. Yeah. It would certainly depend on how much it kind of rocks. I have had one case where I have just taken the stone back to somebody in a lapidary club and got them just to get that base smooth so that it wasn't going to move. Yeah, and it was quicker and almost more efficient to do that than it was to try and figure out a tiny little depression or something. But yeah, that's definitely something to consider, Dawn, that if it's not going to hold in place with your tabs, yeah, it either needs a little bit more security by kind of setting it into a hole or a depression, or get it smoothed off. Yeah, but that's
no worries.
Yeah, a design question. Yeah, but definitely a good question to ask, because yes, not everything is perfectly flat. Yeah.
Well, good luck with your challenge there, Dawn.
Yep.
And I'd like to thank everybody for their participation this morning, in particular Dawn, Trevor, Wayne, Gail and Carol. And,
thank you so much, guys.
And especially you, Catherine. So you really did demonstrate some great techniques there, and I'm sure everyone will gain a lot out of it this morning and into the future. And we'll look forward to having you back in the real near future, Catherine, with another adventure in tab settings.
Yes. So today we did external tab settings. Our next one is going to be internal tab settings. So yes, come back and join me for that one, a variation on a theme of how you might want to set a stone. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Catherine. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.